South Korea establishes a diplomatic relationship with Cuba in a surprise announcement overnight. Seoul sees this diplomatic landmark as a blow to North Korea, a longtime ally of Cuba. North Korea says what it fired yesterday was a new surface-to-sea missile. Having overseen the testing, its leader Kim Jong-un urges to strengthen the defense posture near the western inter-Korean maritime border. Doctors in Korea are out on the picket line this evening to protest the expansion of the number of doctors. The government maintains its hardline approach while it continues discussing measures. It's February 15, 2024. This is Newscenter. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We start with news of South Korea forging formal ties with Cuba, a longtime ally of North Korea. This was confirmed in a surprise announcement overnight. Our foreign affairs correspondent Pyongyang covers this stride forward and its significance.
Cuba has become the 193rd country in the world to form diplomatic relations with South Korea. In a surprise announcement on Wednesday night, Seoul's foreign ministry said the United Nations representatives for the two countries exchanged official letters in New York, calling it a crucial turning point.
The establishment of diplomatic relations with Cuba, the only country in the Central American and Caribbean region with which we did not have diplomatic ties, is expected to serve as an important turning point in our efforts to strengthen diplomacy in the Latin American region.
This leaves Syria as the only country among UN member states that does not have diplomatic ties with South Korea. Cuba didn't, mainly because it has been and continues to be a close ally of North Korea. The North established diplomatic ties with Cuba in 1960, and Cuba still has an embassy in Pyongyang. The South Korean government has worked on improving relations with the communist-run island for the past 20 years. Growing popularity of Korean culture, such as K-pop and K-dramas in Cuba in recent years, also added momentum. With South Korea and Cuba agreeing to open diplomatic relations, North Korea is expected to become more isolated on the global stage. In fact, a senior official from the presidential office told reporters on Thursday that North Korea will inevitably face a political and psychological blow. By forging formal ties, South Korea also hopes to expand economic cooperation with Cuba. Seoul's foreign ministry said this is expected to help support Korean companies doing business in Cuba. As of 2022, the trade volume between the two countries amounted to approximately $14 million in exports and $7 million in imports. Also, Seoul aims to provide consular assistance to Koreans visiting Cuba. Before the pandemic, around 14,000 Koreans visited Cuba annually, and there are about 1,000 people descended from Koreans who moved to Mexico in 1921. During Japan's colonial rule, who are currently living in Cuba. Pyongyang, Arirang News.
North Korea has confirmed its testing of what it claims a new surface-to-sea missile Wednesday morning. Having overseen the testing, its leader Kim Jong-un urges to strengthen defense posture near the western inter-Korean maritime border. Our defense correspondent Choi Min-jung with the details.
North Korea test-fired a new surface-to-sea missile on Wednesday morning under the supervision of its leader Kim Jong-un. The regime's state-run Korean Central News Agency reported Thursday that Pyongyang test-launched its new missile named Padasuri-6. The missile reportedly flew for 1,400 seconds, a little over 23 minutes, over waters in the East Sea to hit a target. Considering the flight time, the missile is estimated to have flown around 200 kilometers. Experts believe the Padasuri-6 is an upgrade of North Korea's version of Russia's Kh-35 Uran anti-ship missile. Following the North's report, South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff expressed confidence in countering North Korea's threats.
Our military is thoroughly equipped to detect and intercept North Korea's missiles against South Korea.
Kim also ordered a stronger military defense posture in waters north of South Korea's Yeonpyeong and Baekneung-do Islands along the western maritime border. Kim's order comes as he accused South Korean warships of frequently invading its waters by defending the northern limit line, the de facto inter-Korean maritime border, which the regime does not recognize. The North Korean leader warned that Pyongyang would regard the South's violation as an infringement of its sovereignty and an act of military provocation, leading to the use of force. South Korea's military, however, reiterated that the NLL will remain unchanged.
The NLL is our military's unchanging maritime border, and our military will be fully prepared to respond resolutely to any provocation.
Seoul's military detected the latest launch at around 9 a.m. Wednesday. This is the regime's fifth cruise missile launch this year. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
U.S. Special Envoy on North Korean human rights issues Julie Turner met today South Korea's Foreign Minister Cho Tae-yeol, during which she said Washington plans to work closely with Seoul to promote human rights in the regime. This as she is visiting Seoul to discuss ways to help improve the situation in the north. Cho said he hopes they can further deepen cooperation on this matter on the global stage, especially as South Korea and Japan currently serve as non-permanent members of the UN Security Council, of which the U.S. is a permanent member. In other news, doctors in South Korea are out on the picket line this evening to protest the expansion of the medical school enrollment quota. Our correspondent Choi Soo-hyung is at where one of the rallies is due to take place. Soo-hyung, I hear doctors are to gather there in about an hour or so. How does it look from where you are?
Good evening, Jungmin. Now I'm in front of Yongsan Presidential Office where the Seoul Medical Association is preparing a protest against the government's plan to expand the mass school enrollment quota. The protest will begin at 7 p.m. so doctors are arriving ready to make their voice heard. It has been more than a week since the government decided to raise the mass school enrollment quota by 2,000 per year starting in 2025. Today, 16 medical associations nationwide are gathering and continuing simultaneous protests all over the country. Even the police are on high alert. Still, no mass resignations or large-scale protests involving millions of people have been taken yet. But the leader of the Korean Intern Residents Association and one resident at St. Mary's Hospital in Daejeon submitted resignation letters, but both letters have not been accepted by each hospital. Also, tensions have grown among medical students, with some planning to take the semester off. Doctors are concerned about the quality of education being affected due to a lack of classrooms, practical training space, and professors in each school.
And Soo-hyung, how is the government responding to this?
Yes, the Ministry of Health and Welfare Concern Center and what will happen in the healthcare field if the trainee doctors and med students take collective actions. Currently, the Health Ministry prohibits collective action by doctors and has warned of the possibility of licenses being revoked if they do not follow a ministry's immediate return to work order in the event of a strike. The government's firm stance seems to be effective for doctors taking a cautious approach. Under these circumstances, the Health Ministry said today that large-scale strikes may not actually happen.
We will absolutely not create a situation where the lives and health of the people are threatened. It is not appropriate to discuss specific plans here at this point, because the strike has not taken place yet, and the possibility of large-scale strikes becoming a reality is, in my view, not very high.
And also, the government will plan to expand non-face-to-face treatment in preparation for a future strike. The ministry said they are ready for negotiations with the doctors at any time. That's all I have for now. Back to you, Jungmin.
Our Choi Soo-hyung live in Yongsan. Thank you. Korea's ICT exports last month noted a two-digit expansion on-year for the first time in 20 months, largely driven by semiconductor shipments. Here is our economics correspondent, An Sung-jin.
A strong chip performance pulled up South Korea's tech exports once again. With a steady increase in outbound shipments of semiconductors, which began last November, the country's ICT exports saw a surplus of $4.5 billion for the month of January. Data from the Trade Ministry on Thursday showed that the value of exports stood at $16.35 billion, which is a 25% on-year increase. This is the first time that exports increased by double digits since May 2022. The figure has been attributed to an increase in semiconductor exports, which climbed by 53%. Memory chip exports, which jumped by 90% compared to the year before, and a rise in the average unit prices of DRAM chips pushed up the value of chip exports. Increased shipments of displays for high-value added products such as TVs and laptops also added to the growth in the value of ICT exports. Alongside outbound shipments of semiconductors and displays, computers and telecommunication devices all climbed by more than 25% on-year as well. However, mobile industry exports saw a drop of nearly 10% year-on-year due to weaker demand as well as a high base effect from the year before. By country, South Korea's tech exports saw an increase in shipments to most countries, including China, Vietnam, the United States, and Japan, while shipments to the European Union were also up. This was once again led by a strong performance of semiconductor exports. China is South Korea's largest ICT export destination, with nearly 50% of outbound shipments heading there. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
An annual shortfall in national tax revenue was recorded for South Korea last year amid a downturn in the economy. Data from the Finance Ministry released on Thursday shows that the revenue in 2023 stood at 344 trillion won, or around $250 billion. That's an annual shortfall of nearly $40 billion compared to the year before. The ministry attributed the fall mainly to the economic downturn, which has led to a drop in corporate taxes and with fewer real estate transactions, leading to a decline in property taxes. The issue of so-called Korea discount, meaning its stocks being undervalued, has been making headlines recently. It's the topic of our weekly business segment tonight. Our economics correspondent Moon Hae-ryun joins me in the studio. Hi, Hae-ryun.
Good evening, Jung.
Evening. So what exactly is the Korea discount and why is an issue?
So the Korea discount refers to a phenomenon in which the value of companies that are listed on the Korean stock market is lower than that of other major countries. It's difficult to determine a single cause for why this is the case, but geopolitical risks, lower stock market reliability, and a management culture that values major shareholders more than general shareholders are often mentioned as contributing factors. And it's a very real issue. According to the Korea Exchange, the PB ratio of the country's benchmark KOSPI is one of the lowest out of the 38 OECD member countries. PB stands for price-to-book ratio, and it shows the market valuation of a company compared to its book value. If the PB ratio is lower than 1, it means that the company's current stock value is lower than the money left from selling its assets. Domestic tech giant Samsung Electronics has a PB ratio value of 1.1, which is significantly lower than Apple's. And South Korean multinational automotive manufacturer Hyundai Motor has a PB ratio of 0.5. As a result, the Yoon administration has pledged a reform of the stock market, starting with the short-selling ban last year and following up with a new program that's to come.
제 임기 중에 글로벌 스탠다드에 맞지 않는 자본시장의 규제는 과감하게 혁파해서 글로벌 증시 수준으로 코리아 디스카운트를 해소할 것입니다.
And Hae-ryun, what is this suggested new program hoping to tackle this issue?
So a general outline of the corporate value-up program was released last month, and as you can probably tell by the name, it aims to increase the value of stocks with low PB ratios. The financial regulatory body said that while the finer details will be announced sometime later this month, it consists of 3 main components. The first is the sharing of information, disclosing comparative data of major investment indicators such as the PB ratio and the return on equity value for listed companies. The second is to recommend firms to set concrete plans to increase corporate value, and the third is introducing exchange-traded funds of companies that have achieved such goals. And even before its official implementation, the program is already having an effect on the stock market. Following its announcement last month, the Kospi Composite Index surged from the 2,400 mark to over 2,620 over the past few weeks.
Stocks of those that have low PB ratios, such as financial and motor firms, have generally shown the biggest rise.
Foreign investments too came piling in. In February so far, offshore investors bought nearly $4.5 billion worth of local stocks, which is the fifth largest monthly sum to date despite only being halfway through the month. Experts are hopeful about what the program could continue to do for the market once it goes into effect.
We can look forward to an increase in capital efficiency and greater ROE for firms with low PB ratios, leading to a rise in PB ratios for these firms.
And are there any concerns ahead of the release of its finer details?
Well, in light of the market showing a sharp upward trend following the announcement, experts are wary that this could die off just as quickly. I spoke to an expert about why the program is attracting foreign investment and what the government needs to do to maintain this trend. Let's take a listen.
Through the Value Up program, there's a good possibility that several of the problems that are inherent in Korean stocks may be reduced, but they have to be followed by further reforms and further commitment by Korean companies and the Korean government that stockholders' value will be respected.
And this commitment is not only something that needs to be reflected in policies, but the length of time that they're implemented for.
Because the Korean discount has lasted for decades, any short-term programs are not going to be able to eliminate Korean discount.
There are also concerns that as the current program looks as though it will be more of an advisory than enforcement, requiring firms to set target goals could fall flat. But we'll have to wait for further details to see how the government plans to address these concerns.
All right, thanks for your report today, Hye-ryung.
Thank you for having me.
In the U.S., one person was killed and more than 21 were injured in Kansas City, Missouri on Wednesday at a parade for the Super Bowl winning Chiefs. Chung Eun-ju has the latest.
A shooting at the Kansas City Chiefs Super Bowl victory parade on Wednesday left one person dead and at least 21 others injured. According to officials, 3 people have been taken into custody for questioning. Kansas City Police Chief Stacey Graves said authorities are still working to determine the total number of victims. Interim Kansas City Fire Chief said some of the victims were children. According to Children's Mercy Kansas City Senior Vice President Stephanie Meyer, on Wednesday evening, 11 children were being treated at the hospital, 9 of them for gunshot wounds, although all are expected to recover from their injuries. Kansas City Police Chief said officers responded immediately after gunshots were heard. Some 800 law enforcement officers were at the rally and parade that preceded it. The city's fire department was also present to provide medical attention if needed.
Because of bad actors, which were very few, this tragedy occurred, even in the presence of uniformed law enforcement officers, who again ran towards them and took them into custody.
An estimated 1 million people were in downtown Kansas City celebrating their team's back-to-back Super Bowl championship win when shots were fired west of Union Station, which was where the parade ended at around 2 p.m. local time. Players were still on the stage at the victory rally when the shooting took place. The National Football League team said in a statement that all of the Chiefs players, coaches, and staff who attended the victory rally were accounted for and safe. Kansas City Chiefs players expressed their sorrow on Wednesday over the fatal shooting. According to the Gun Violence Archive, the shooting was at least the 48th mass shooting in the United States this year. In a statement, U.S. President Joe Biden reflected on the issue of gun violence in the country, saying, "Today's events should move us, shock us, shame us into action," as he called for gun reform and a ban on assault rifles in the U.S. Chung Eun-ju, Arirang News.
Over in Indonesia, Defense Minister and former General Prabowo Subianto appears to have won the country's presidential election. Lee Eun-jin has more.
Indonesian Defense Minister and former General Prabowo Subianto has declared victory in Indonesia's presidential election after unofficial vote counts showed him with a significant lead ahead of his rivals. While the official tally results by the Election Commission are yet to be released, the 72-year-old former Special Forces commander has secured about 58% of the votes, according to 4 pollsters based on quick count ballots from a sample of voting stations across the country. Subianto taking an absolute majority of votes above the threshold of 50% nationwide and 20% in half of the country's provinces means a runoff vote would not be required. The quick counts are based on actual votes at a sample of polling stations across Indonesia. Subianto's rivals Ganjar Pranowo and Anies Baswedan have not yet conceded defeat and urged the public to await the official result, which is expected by March 20th at the latest.
The counting process is not finished. At the moment, the parliamentary and legislative vote counts are still ongoing. Please continue this. I would like to emphasize that I am a true Democrat. We will respect the results of the people's aspirations, because that is the desire of the people, and we have to respect the desire of the people.
Subianto was the front-runner going into the poll. One striking feature of this election was the country's youngest ever electorate. More than half of the voters are either millennials born after 1980 or Generation Zs born after 1996. Analysts say endorsement by President Widodo, popularly known as Jokowi, may have been a deciding factor. Under Widodo, Indonesia has seen a period of remarkable growth, averaging 5% annually, except in 2020 when the economy contracted due to the COVID-19 pandemic. His infrastructure building, health, education, and poverty welfare policies remain highly popular. With Widodo's 36-year-old son as his running mate, Subianto pledged to continue the policies of Jokowi. Critics have accused Widodo of trying to build a political dynasty. At polling stations in Jakarta, ballots are pulled out of boxes by hand, read aloud, and tallied by election workers. It is a labor-intensive task performed in a country of more than 200 million eligible voters spread across an archipelago of more than 17,000 islands. The laborious official count may not be finished for up to a month, but quick counts have provided an accurate picture of results in all 4 presidential elections held in Indonesia since direct voting began in 2004. The new president will be sworn in on October 20th. Lee Eun-jin, Arirang News.
The Korea Football Association National Team Committee, after a long meeting on Thursday, agreed to suggest the firing of Klinsmann, the head coach of the men's national team. However, the final call can only be made by the KFA's President Chung Mong-gyu. The committee announced its decision at a press briefing at the KFA headquarters in Seoul, citing concerns about Klinsmann's leadership skills. Klinsmann attended via video link as he had already returned to his home in the U.S. After South Korea lost 2-0 to Jordan in the semi-final of the Asian Cup in Qatar this month, discontent began to grow among the fans due to Klinsmann's perceived lack of tactical acumen and commitment.
It felt like spring was coming, but we are back to winter in the space of just a day. The rain that was falling in the morning suddenly turned into heavy snow. After rain and snow all over the country, the weather is getting chillier. The snowstorm will have subsided by tonight in most areas, but extra caution is necessary on wet roads on the way home. Some areas on the east coast of Gyeongsangbuk-do province will have rain until dawn tomorrow. Tomorrow the sky will clear up again, but there is a possibility that wet roads will freeze as temperatures drop below freezing overnight. Tomorrow morning there will be a flash of freezing cold centered on inland areas. Seoul and Gwangju will start off at -2 degrees Celsius, Daejeon -5 degrees. Huge temperature gaps will be seen tomorrow. Seoul and Chuncheon will be topping out at 7 degrees, Daegu and Busan 10 degrees Celsius. Temperatures will rise again from the weekend. However, on Sunday, it will start raining all over the country and continue until early next week. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up